it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Welcome to Undead Live, reporting from the front lines of the zombie apocalypse. We have your back morning, noon, or night, whether you're dead, undead, recently deceased, or fully alive. We've got the apocalypse covered. I'm Athena Actipus, and I'm here with my co-host, Dave Lundberg-Kenrick. Dave, are you there? You in the zombie kill room? Oh, I think we've lost Dave. Oh, no, wait, there he is. Dave, are you there?
Hello, yes. How's it going?
I'm doing all right. So Dave, today we're talking about the apocalypse, right?
Yeah, we are.
We do every day.
Well, but maybe the upside of the apocalypse, right?
So you think there's an upside to the apocalypse?
Yeah, I'm worried about a lot of things, from the environment to wealth equality, but I don't know, maybe things will be great, like the Jetsons or something like that, where everything's awesome. So.
Dave, you seem weirdly optimistic about the future. Do you think we really can rebuild society in the shadow of these multiple apocalypses that we've been enduring the last few years?
Yeah, honestly, I do. I feel like, I go through most days in a panic attack, but then I read like old science fiction that's always like 1940 will be the last year people survive. And I'm like, that was a long time ago. So maybe that's what's going on now. Maybe things will keep getting better. So, I do think we have to worry about things like the environment, and, global warming is a big issue. But I think we could hopefully come up with some good cures if we work together with our neighbors.
Well, I agree with you about the working together part for sure. But overall, I don't know if I'm quite as optimistic as you about like the Jetsons thing. I think that we might have some more apocalypse ahead of us. And maybe if we work together, though, we can deal with it a little better.
I think so. I think that we could. I am hoping that we'll come up with more and more solutions, more and more solutions to things like global warming, things like all of these problems.
So that's what our show is about today. And we're going to talk to a lot of guests, like so many guests, about how they feel about the future, whether we should be optimistic or not, or both at the same time. And for all of you who are watching, Dave and I want to know what you think. We all want to know what you think. What apocalypses are you worried about or not worried about? And while you are typing, hit that like button, subscribe, ring that little bell to get that, that notification when we have new shows coming out. So make sure you do that and tell us, what apocalypses are you worried about? What are you not worried about? And we'll talk to our whole Z team today about this whole question.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll have a lot of guests. And so yeah. What about you? What are you worried about, Athena? I know.
Well, Dave, in my opinion, there's just like a multitude of apocalypses, zombie apocalypses, like not zombie-based apocalypses. There's just so many things that are going on that are really terrifying. But I think if we sort of face it, if we look it in the eye and say, okay, I understand what you are, and I understand what the problem, or maybe I don't understand what the problem is, but I recognize that the problem is there and that we have to put our heads together in order to solve it. I think that's really the only way that we can move forward. And, I think it doesn't have, even if, the reality is that we're facing a lot of risks, it doesn't necessarily have to be scary if we're approaching it together and with an attitude of teamwork.
So what do you think? One of the big things we've talked about throughout this season has been the environment, farming, global warming, these sorts of things. What do you think is a way we can fix this?
Well, I think we need to bring a team together to talk about what the problems are and how we can solve them. Is that something that you think we can do here today? Bring everybody together?
So. I think that'd be a great thing to do. In fact, I think I might hear somebody at the door.
Let's see who it is. Somebody's at the door.
Hold on. What's the password?
Rain.
brains. That wasn't the most well thought out password we could have come up with. Oh, look who it is.
It's Erica.
Food correspondent, Erica.
Hey,
Welcome.
hey, nice to be here. Love
Great
what
to
you've
have
done with
you.
the place.
Yeah, you can see there's toe jam and tongues and all sorts
I'm
of
into
things.
it. You're canning your own produce. That's great.
It's sustainable.
Yeah.
So how are you doing?
Doing really well.
So good.
I'm on team optimism today.
On team optimism.
Yeah.
So what do you think the sort of best future holds for?
Well, we've kind of screwed everything up. I think
Sure.
that the best part of our future relies on the kids who are going to be cleaning up this mess. And there's some climate facts that the New York Times just published. So people are moving slowly in terms of like national policies to address this. But if we can get those going in the right direction, like I feel like you can leverage the sort of unease and paralyzing fear in a healthy way and get involved through mutual aid or anything related to your legislative district and trying to get the people elected that can actually enact change. Like if you turn fear into action, I think that's a net good.
You know, you'd mentioned kids, and one thing I've noticed, my little brother and my son and daughter are all high school age, and they're really interested in sustainability as careers. That I think this new generation coming up is actually taking this very, very seriously. And so do we have the graph of the possible outcomes? So tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, so I mean, the red band at the top is us not really doing anything. 2015 policies onward, everything just goes to shit real quick.
Okay.
But with current policies, we're kind of at an evening off point. And I mean, pledged if we can get there down to like 2.1, and every 0.1 degree matters at like a global scale. So I mean, it is reversible or at least sustainable at the current sort of messed up level that we're used to right now. It doesn't have to keep rising based on current policies.
So let me just ask, because we've got this current policy still gets us to 3 degrees Celsius warmer than it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, we might not have a Florida.
So what will we have in Arizona?
We might not have in Arizona too, but we might create these beautiful opportunities for biodiversity to flourish in ways that it hasn't before. Just all wetlands, or just going back to Gila monsters and tarantulas in the Sonoran Desert.
We've got a great question here from Liz. She's asking, is it true that we only have 3 years to change our climate policies? Otherwise, we're fucked. I mean, I added that last part, but I think that's the gist.
I mean, everything that we're doing now already has implications 3 years plus into the future. So it's not like we only have 3 years. We have minus 3 years. It's what we're dealing with right now. But if we can, like, elect folks that give a shit about climate and are willing to do the work to actually pass legislation to cap emissions, then it doesn't have to be the worst case scenario.
The nice thing about that graph, I hadn't seen that before. I have to say, the fact that it starts going down if we keep our current policies, that is nice to see.
Yeah, and like all of the alternative energy sources like wind and solar are now cheaper than a lot of the fossil fuel producing sources. And it's like, if you just look at gas prices right now, yeah, they hurt, but maybe they should hurt a little more than we're used to. And it's kind of might be more of the norm. Like if we can get on the sort of solar and wind energy point, I mean, I'm optimistic too, Alana.
So what sort of things can people do, like especially kids who are deciding what to do for careers, like that could help us survive or thrive or postpone or whatever?
So I feel like a lot of my students and then my kids who are teens too are also, they think interdisciplinarily, they think sustainably, like it's just a norm in a way that it hasn't been for a lot of previous generations. And so if you're going to need a lot of different points of expertise because it's a huge, complex, intersecting issue. So I think pushing both of those as options, I'm crossing my fingers a little bit.
All right, me too. I think we're going to come up with things we've never even thought of. So
that's right.
Excellent. Well, I think this is a great time for us to talk with Emily Zarka. Emily, I know that you have been thinking for a long time about these issues of the future and how we can use fiction, especially science fiction, to engage with that. What are your thoughts about the future? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? And how can fiction help us to wrap our heads around all this?
I think I'm somewhere in between. I find, as a literary scholar, I always turn to books and the knowledge of others to try to inform my opinions. And apocalypses and alternative futures have been wide-ranging across the history of science fiction and art of any kinds. Whether it's, us going to space stations, being forced underground, aliens terraforming the Earth, we have so many different examples to rely on. That being said, I think that there's a thin line between utopia and dystopia. So if we look at science fiction as a magnifying glass for existing social and environmental issues, we might have some emotional and intellectual exercises in these texts that could give us an idea of our potential outcomes. However, it's up to us to decide if those fictions are important to us and if we use them as ways to develop our own conscious futures.
So what could a conscious future look like? What do you think would be a great true utopia?
Ooh, a true utopia. I don't think we can ever have a true utopia. Again, turning to examples from science fiction that I can think of, there seems to be, whenever we have this destruction, there is a rise of an alternative power. Sometimes that power is humanity, sometimes it's nature, sometimes it's aliens. So Octavia Butler's series Lilith's Brood, Earth is completely destroyed by nuclear war, and only aliens make it habitable again. And there's a whole slew of issues that go on there. Or something like Mary Shelley's The Last Man, which is particularly relevant to COVID-19. A pandemic wipes out the majority of humanity, and Earth actually thrives from the absence of humans. And her book is more about exploring, are we really doing the right thing, not just to the Earth, but to one another? So again, I think that there's no true utopia in my mind. I don't think we can ever get that point just because of human greed and capitalism. But I do think that there's moments of innovation that we can turn to. And like Erica was saying, I think younger generations are particularly fruitful for that. But I also think us old folks should be trying to give the opportunity to everyone to speak. And that means being more inclusive as a whole.
Wow, those are such amazing, excellent points. And I think that, as we all look at the future, thinking of how we have in the past sort of, envisioned the future, and so many thinkers that have taken so much complex information just kind of out there and boiled it all down into a specific vision of the future. It really offers a way for us to kind of bring our heads together and think about, something more concrete than all of these huge problems that it can be really hard to wrap our heads around.
There's power in narratives. I don't think we should dismiss the ability of storytelling, if that's fictional or current historical events, to really give legitimacy and understanding, particularly to these very complex issues. Again, science fiction is never about the alien or the monster or the plague. It's always about our response to it. And I think that if we look at our current responses in the real world to various events that are happening and try to frame that as exploratory narratives, maybe we can see alternative futures that are more positive than negative.
What about, Erica just mentioned, she said Star Trek while you were talking about possible utopias, right? So now that's a world where people sort of work together, right?
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I'm not as familiar with Star Trek. Apologies. You could say Star Wars too, or The Expanse, which is now a television show based on James S.A. Corey's series. Even though we have these, maybe excellent technologies, we have these people working together, there's still issues of race and sexuality and discrimination and power and money and who's controlling the technology. I mean, especially looking at the original Star Trek, I think we can see that there's some disparities going on there. So again, it's not like humanity is going to erase all of our current issues, even if we do have these more positive alternative futures. I think, unfortunately, human nature is to be in conflict. Internally and externally. And again, I think it's more about if we can give each other the opportunity to be heard, hopefully we can eliminate some of those barriers that stop us from achieving maybe the benefits of some kind of utopia.
Well, Emily, I'm going to just jump in because I think that our nature is both to be in conflict and to cooperate. And it's that tension between the two that makes human social life so interesting, and also makes the whole idea of like us managing a planet together so challenging, because yes, there are these desires to cooperate, but there's also the potential for conflict, especially when resources are limited or if people perceive them as limited, even if they're not. So I think that, we have both of these elements to our nature. And I think, fiction is a great way also to engage with those sort of like fundamental tensions and dramas.
Maybe that's the real thin line between utopia and dystopia, is how are we balancing conflict and cooperation?
Now, what if we all work together to fight off giant lizards, right? Because I've heard giant lizards might be on the horizon. And
should we transition to talking about giant reptiles? What do you guys think? Is it
Sure.
giant reptile time? All right. Well, then we have to bring in our resident expert on evolutionary biology and medicine as well. But Dr. Zed, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. This is a good opportunity, and I'm outside. It's lovely weather, and it's hard to worry about an apocalypse when the weather is so pleasant. But you can never be too careful. I would say that you never know when the zombies or the giant reptiles might.
What do you have there, Dr. Zed?
Oh, just the typical defensive weapon. It's an axe. It's yeah. But it's useful. It's useful to have. You can't. I'm all about safety first, right? You can never be too careful. So what do we do? Thinking about what the future has in store for us, and one of the things the future might have in store for us is giant snakes.
Tell us more. So why giant snakes? I mean, I know that there's a plan to talk about giant snakes, but you're going to have to explain this to me a little bit more. Why do we have to worry about giant snakes?
Giant snakes. I mean, isn't that enough of something to just be worried about? I don't know. Because it turns out that during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum that happened about 55 million years ago, which is that they had about 6 degrees Celsius warmer temperatures on average, 6 to 8. And there were giant reptiles at that time. Now we're not talking dinosaurs. We're talking giant snakes, giant turtles, giant lizards. And meanwhile, the mammals got very, very tiny. So we have minuscule horses. And I'm hoping we have a picture that we can bring up to show this. There we go. Yeah. So that huge snake on the left, there's no human to scale, but this is Titanoboa. During this 58 million years ago from northeastern Colombia, they estimated a body length of 13 meters, a mass of 2,500 pounds. This is a big snake. So you might think if you're a mammal and you have all these kinds of massive snakes running around, one solution is to become very small, right? I don't know. Maybe that's a bad solution, but that's what happened. So pictured there on the right is the tiny little horse. It's an ancestor to modern horses. You can see it's about house cat sized, and this is Arenahippus pernix. So yeah, something to look forward to, something to think about.
Doctor said, why do we have to worry about this now? Is this something that's like about to happen?
If you look in the Everglades and you see some of the boa constrictors there, they're getting pretty huge, right? Warm temperatures do encourage changes in life on the planet right now. When they get on a plane, that's when all bets are off. That's for sure. Yeah. Interestingly, one thing that happens with warming is that I was on the beach yesterday. I burned my feet. I don't remember doing that a couple of decades ago, going to the beach in Southern California. The sand gets extremely hot. So there's a thin line between comfortably warm and your feet are burning. But one thing that happens with warming sand is that the sea turtles, when they lay their eggs, they actually they're more likely to have female offspring. So by warming the world, we are changing the gender of sea turtles. We get giant boa constrictors in the Everglades. All these things we can actually measure right now.
Wow.
Well, looking back at Emily's example from fiction, I mean, they had all female dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, and there was still the potential for life. So
life finds a way, always.
Life finds a way. I was going to say one thing that we can think about, we can imagine there could be smaller humans in the future, right? Like those horses. One thing that we might do is look for strategies that could maybe preserve body size, or things that actually encourage us to not suffer these problems. And probably one of the reasons why these animals become smaller when it's really warm is there's more infectious disease, and raises the possibility that we could vaccinate or inoculate ourselves out of some of these evolutionary changes that might happen in the future. And in fact, vaccines are associated with larger human body size right now. Vaccines make bigger children and bigger adults. So that's just something that I've been thinking about.
So you're saying that vaccination can help mammals fight back against the giant reptiles?
Exactly. Or we can, maybe we can inoculate our way through this global warming apocalypse.
Well, so Dr. Zed, I have to ask also, while we have you, you brought up the increased risk of infectious disease from rising temperatures. Do we have more pandemics on the horizon as a result of global warming or climate change more generally?
Yeah. So in thinking about this episode of Undead Live, I think it's time to retire the term post-apocalyptic. We're just going to have to kind of make our way through the apocalypse, and increased pandemics, increased infectious disease are part of that. But like Dave would say, there's reasons for hope. We do have this type. We have the will, and we have the ability to come up with solutions. Vaccines are one solution.
And just to clarify, if you get a vaccine, that's not necessarily going to give you a little boost in height, like Pam was suggesting. It's that if you're vaccinated at an early age, you are more likely to reach. Can you explain that finding?
It's been best studied in populations where there's a lot of childhood infectious disease. And I was looking at a paper that came out of India where they rolled out a pretty impressive vaccination campaign. And kids were both taller and heavier, both as children and adults. That could be a double-edged sword too, but vaccines seem to make for bigger kids and bigger adults, at least in theory. And that's supported by some data. It also can improve cognition and brain function, which might be useful when you're running away from Titanoboa. But yeah, so it's bananas, isn't it? Just thinking about these crazy things.
Oh, somebody's at the door. Let's see. Password, please.
Giant snakes.
Giant? Sure.
In here.
Look who it is.
I'm so glad I made it. I know we're talking about the apocalypse, and I'm taking it upon myself to save every banana that I can and enjoy every banana. Here, let me dole these out for you.
Oh my gosh, look.
There you go.
Jason brought bananas.
And the reason is because I don't know if you've heard, but these are going extinct. Bananas could be gone for the number one product, number one fruit of the face of the earth could be gone because of a disease that killed the previous strain of bananas, the Gros Michels, in the 1940s and 50s. This is a brand of a strain of banana called the Cavendish, but that same insidious disease has finally learned how to infect the Cavendish banana, and we don't know how to stop it. So imagine a world where your grandchildren are watching an old Carmen Miranda movie and they don't understand what's on her head. Or they're seeing a comedian slip on a banana peel and they say to you, grandparents, explain to me how this is true. So, well, give me a banana. And they say, there is no such thing as a banana. What kind of cream pies will we smash into each other's faces in the future if there are no bananas? So with that in mind, I'm just going to eat as many bananas as I can and hope that maybe through genetically modified means, which I know is a scary term for a lot of people, but if a genetically modified banana can save the banana, if more selective breeding, if better environmental policy creates more sustainable land that can grow these fruits that are very difficult to grow, then maybe we will be able to save the banana. Right now, I'm a little bit pessimistic, which is why I'm doing my best to not only.
Eat them while we got them.
I can't even open the bananas anymore.
So what do you think?
So we engineered these to begin with. If you look at bananas in the wild, they are nasty, full of seeds, and not very delicious.
And they're kind of small and squat looking
they're
too.
they're like those little mini bananas that you see that are like a novelty.
So, so how do you think we survive the banana apocalypse? Yes, that.
Well, again, hoping for, maybe in the future we'll be able to 3D print food. Certainly I think by embracing the idea of sensible genetic modification, something that doesn't, immediately exclude farmers or people from growing these fruits, Most of the stuff that we eat now is genetically modified in some way or another. So embracing that idea and not just being afraid of the idea of zombie food or Frankenfood might be one place to start.
I mean, that sounds kind of great. We could print them in pancake form, right? Just like boom, banana pancakes.
That's true.
And then,
print them in cream pie form.
Yeah, exactly.
Print them in banana pudding form.
So super.
The
slippery
Southern
peels.
economy will collapse without banana pudding as a dessert at hometown barbecues. Anyway, Liz, I was raised to think that GMOs were the evil thing that was going to destroy our bodies and destroy our minds, but maybe science can actually help. Again, if it's done in a sensible way that allows people the information they need and allows them to grow this kind of food on their own, then as long as we're saving the bananas, I am good.
Dr. Zed, do you have a medical perspective on GMOs that you could share with us? Are they a problem or are they not a problem?
I mean, they're a reality, right? Especially in North America, the vast majority of corn is grown through GMO means. I don't see it as I think I have a middle way of kind of approaching this. It's probably not the massive miracle that some people make it out to be, although there is great promise for some GMO technologies, and it's not the boogeyman that we need to worry about so much. I'll just leave it at that.
There are some really good examples. So if you look at like golden rice, throughout India, they launched it so that it included vitamin A in the rice, which was something that they needed to supplement the population. So, I mean, you can use a GMO for good too. It doesn't have to be something that is mixed with sci-fi and kind of has a little bit of fear tinge to it because of that.
Well, so, I'm going to protect these, and I'm going to go out and search for more bananas out in the zombie wild. Cheers. Enjoy these while you can. You might see me a little bit later. I don't know.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Giant snakes.
Oh. Maybe giant bananas are on the way. So we could just grow one giant.
Really big one.
Yeah. So.
The modern banana is a freak of nature for sure. It is highly, highly unnatural and wonderful at the same time.
If science fiction has taught me anything, is giant things are usually not good. So I'm going to say I'd prefer no giant bananas. But
are you thinking they might become sentient? Like, is that the fear?
You never know, right? I mean, I think of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and my mind goes not to bananas, but like to Starship Troopers or to the Big Bug films, which actually did involve GMOs and how there were sort of things getting into water supplies, for instance. But like Erica was saying with the positivity of golden rice, it's again about how the narrative is controlled. How are we branding and selling these literally, ideally, and then in consumer products, how are we telling the stories about these things? Are we fear-mongering? Are we making them into monsters or scary science fiction? Or are we making them into positive technological advances?
Or are we acknowledging the complexities that they, offer some things that are really beneficial and also, maybe have some ethical dilemmas associated with them or some unintended consequences that we have to consider. I think that's like a really hard thing, because we do want a simple story and sometimes the story isn't simple. So, we both, fiction can offer us some really valuable things in terms of that overall narrative, but then at some point we also do need to look at the specifics of the situation that we're dealing with and see, how we can sort of navigate between those problems. So,
yes, which is why Channel Z is so important, because we have all these different minds coming together to help tell the story rather than relying on one type of person.
Absolutely. And I know you all want to stay apprised of all the latest apocalypse news. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. And we're going to take some last words. Emily, do you have any final words for us before we move on to the next segment of our show?
I hate how much of a literature scholar I say, but keep reading from lots of different people. Look to the past to help us better understand the future.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Emily Zarka. Dr. Zed, would you offer us
2 words? Big snakes. That's pretty much it. That's our main concern. That's our main concern today.
Dr. Zed, I know we've spent a lot of time, over the course of this last season talking about the pandemic. Obviously, we touched on it just a little bit. What are your thoughts on the pandemic apocalypse before we go on to the next segment? Is it over? Is it not
It
over?
is most definitely not over. That's why I said we should retire this term post-apocalyptic. But there's reasons for hope there too. I think on previous versions of kind of our grand finales, I have taken the role of the optimist. I think maybe a more realistic view is to say, hey, we're going to get these little waves. The pandemic is just going to keep rippling across the globe, and our nemesis, this novel coronavirus, is going to continue to evolve. We have that to look forward to almost no matter what. Like, we are just too good a habitat for this virus, and by we I mean the human species. So we're just not going to get rid of it. Hopefully, like I said, I'm a huge fan of vaccination, and I think that we have yearly vaccinations to look forward to. It will just join the yearly flu vaccine that I get every year. That will have a yearly coronavirus vaccine too. So that's my thinking.
Yeah, so you shifted a little bit, it sounds like, from being very optimistic in previous seasons to now having a combination of optimism and seeing this as a long-term issue that we're going to be grappling with for the foreseeable future.
You got to be realistic about the threats that are around you. You can't be blind to them or imagine they don't exist. You just have to be prepared. So that's it.
Well, Dr. Zed, I'm so glad that you are prepared there for whatever giant reptiles might come your way. It looks rather jungle-ish behind you. I'm not sure exactly where you
never
are.
know.
But yeah.
The skin on the back of my neck is starting to crawl just thinking about it.
All right. Well, I'll let you go so you can focus your full attention on protecting yourself from giant reptiles or, small bananas or whatever might threaten you there. Thank you so much for joining our show today, Dr. Zed. All right. Well, so Dave, what are your thoughts about this so far? We finished the first segment of our show. How are you feeling? You feeling still optimistic or?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like we just replaced the dying banana groves with snake farms. I can eat snake meat. That's fine. I can get a pet snake that I can ride around to stop global warming. I don't know what sort of methane emissions snakes put out, but maybe snake farms. So, but I guess my big question is, let's say we have this snake-topia where everyone has the snake. Will everyone have a place in this new society? Or is this going to be a society where only a few super rich snake farmers own everything? And so, what do you think?
I think we need to bring some other members of our team to help resolve this issue. I mean, I could totally see a situation where you have just a few, really good snake tamers that maybe dominate. So maybe we should bring Ilana on and she can give us some of her thoughts. What do you think about that?
I think that'd be great. I'd love to hear her thoughts.
Ilana,
hey everyone.
Welcome.
Oh, it's great to see you in the studio, and it's looking sharp. It looks like it's evolving, and we've managed to create a safe way to get to the studio, which is encouraging.
Yeah, a password.
Yeah, I might suggest not using brains as the password in the future.
We'll work on it. We'll see.
That's okay.
What about?
So you bring up giant snakes, and I can't really speak to that because it's definitely not my area of expertise. But if we want to use a giant snake as a metaphor for, say, the giant, seemingly unstoppable algorithms that seem to be ruling our lives and snaking through our consciousness and snaking through our culture, then I'm for that. And if we're talking about power and who might control those snakes, and I'm going to leave that metaphor now to the side, talking about who controls, these small amount of people, such as Mark Zuckerberg and other Silicon Valley social media titans, who have this power concentrated very tightly on what we see, what we do, our news algorithms. I'm actually optimistic for the near and long-term future, but specifically the near future, and specifically about social media and regulation, because as we all know, what's been revealed over the past year or two, or I should rather say that's been leaked by people like Frances Haugen about the research that Instagram and Facebook itself did on teen depression, and how their platforms are a terrible source of teen depression, specifically girls, and specifically between the ages of 11 and 13. They've shown conclusively that their platforms have increased teen depression. All right. And this is not like the, panic of, rock and roll music is going to warp teens. It's like very specifically tied to these facts and usage and the advent of that. But with that said,
Ilana, I have to interrupt you for a sec, because you just said you were optimistic, and now you're saying,
here's why I'm optimistic, because parents are getting involved. Okay. Parents are getting involved, much like Mothers Against Drunk Driving did in the 1980s, when children started getting, when news became aware that, kids were getting killed by drunk drivers. Parents got involved and were the catalyst for legislative action. It took a couple of years at first, but it steadily increased. Whereas there was no legislation before protecting kids against people with multiple DUIs, there is now across all 50 states the same. So in that way, it's going to be parents, and I'm seeing this move, saying, these unregulated algorithms, these unregulated platforms that have no age gating, okay, much like you have to be a certain age to buy alcohol and cigarettes, there should be, according to many parents, active rules, very strict rules that don't allow 10-year-old girls to get on Instagram and start the spiral of shame and depression and all of that. So I see that as an optimistic trend happening. And it's going to take some time, but it should lead to some sort of algorithmic regulation.
Yeah, it seems like one of the big issues, Liz is bringing this up here about sort of, understanding and education. A lot of us didn't know what the effects were of social media. And we're still learning about that. And so I think, whenever you have new technology, there can be all of these unanticipated consequences. And sometimes it takes a little while to figure out what those are.
Well, it's true. But, the evidence is starkly clear. And we all know that Zuckerberg could flip a switch tomorrow, change the algorithm from enragement, which generates clicks and likes, to just discourse. It really could be changed, but he needs to see the pressure. He's a parent himself. There needs to be more transparency, and I see the demand for that happening amongst people. And like Liz said, it's an education issue. I mean, look, the fact is that the parents in Silicon Valley don't let their children anywhere near these platforms, the ones that they've created, the ones that they make their millions off of. Their kids are happily gardening in Waldorf schools.
So I have something to add, that you brought up two analogies to like drunk driving and smoking, like secondhand smoke legislation. Both of those things happened at the ground level. There were local municipal kind of movements that then grew into these national pressures. And so I just would like to continue forward with the invitation to continue to engage at that local level about the things that are important to you, whether it's this algorithmic bias and trying to fix those sorts of legislation around that, climate, anything that energizes, motivates you, and keeps like that overwhelming fear away, and gives you something to do. Like that's how change happens, when you have such incredibly difficult and gigantic entities that are not beholden to the sort of laws that are currently in place. Like if you look at big tobacco, or big alcohol, like both of those started at this grassroots level and then kind of worked their way up to these national pressures. So
yeah, that's right. I completely agree. And I think we can even expand on that, philosophically, to, how we really need to actually be the best that we can be in our own lives, in our own world, and be positive influences and look for positive change, to our partners, our family, our colleagues at work, our neighbors, the person who checks us out at the grocery store, right? I mean, if we expand in a positive direction how we can enact change on a very local level, it really does have a multiplying effect. Yeah. And, algorithmically, I think maybe one way to start would be to look into local news sources and look into, what's unfortunate trend of big corporations buying up local media sources and, fighting back against that. Maybe, as simple as subscribing to your local paper, volunteering at it.
Ilana, do you have any other thoughts about, in sort of media and entertainment? Like, are there other reasons that we should be optimistic about the future?
Yes. I'm encouraged by the friction and conflict that's happening in the streaming wars. I see the competition is very positive. I see the tension between the studios and streaming platforms as a positive thing, because I truly believe that the choice available now to most people in the world to watch fantastic content, movies at home in the comfort of their home, as a really good thing. It helps people who can't get to theaters, who don't want to spend the money to get to theaters, who are still concerned about health concerns at movie theaters, because no one's wearing a mask in a movie theater. And movie theaters kind of need to up their game. They need to make the experience better and make there be a compelling reason to say, you know what, I'm going to go see that in a movie theater. I want a better seat. I want some food. I want a better viewing experience. So I think they're going to up their game to keep people coming to the theaters, to compete with how easy and comfortable it is to watch something at home. I do believe certain films should be seen on the big screen. And I love seeing films on the big screen, but it has to really be worth it. And I think that pressure is going to make the culture of watching cinema better.
I wonder if we could even move back to more local cinema, Like, I feel like things are moving. Like you'd mentioned, community. Maybe I love going to local film festivals and things like that.
Totally. Local film festivals and art house cinema might make a comeback, much like, when Walmart wiped out downtowns, right? The downtowns that survived were the ones that had really cool little stores of stuff that you couldn't get at a Walmart. So yeah, bring back some of the art houses that might, play. Like, oh, there's a Kubrick festival coming. How cool would that be to see 2001 on the big screen, and it's not a Marvel movie, but it's something that should be, film festivals. Right, exactly.
Great. Well, I think it's absolutely the right time for us to bring Liz in on this conversation. Liz Grumbaugh, thank you so much for joining us here today. You're on mute, by the way. There we go. Now you're not.
There. This happened the last finale too. I completely didn't have any audio for a while. So I finally figured it out. Thanks, audio zombies. Hi, it's so good to be here.
Amazing having you here. So what are your thoughts? Optimistic, pessimistic, somewhere in between?
I think so. There's a couple. So just thank you to Dr. Zed for saying that the pandemic is not over, right? I wanted to be optimistic about this. It might not be over for years. We need to learn how to live with it. But I think we need to learn how to live with it in a different way where we start to really protect the people that are most at risk, right? And I want to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to say, look, small steps mean something. And that conversation that just happened, like Erica, Dave, Athena, Alana, thank you for that. Small steps mean something in the apocalypse. Do something. Don't doom scroll, right? Doom scrolling in doomsday is not helpful. That's what these platforms, these algorithms, they want you to keep doom scrolling. They want you to stay on the platform. And the way that they do that is by activating your negative emotions. And there's a lot of research about that. But those platforms can also be used for good. And so I thought I was going to come here and talk about like really pessimistically about stuff. But Alana, you've got me thinking about, you know, the small steps on these platforms is the way to use these platforms for good. So I could talk a little bit about mutual aid. Mutual aid during the pandemic, before the pandemic, happening on Instagram, on Facebook. If you're not involved in your local mutual aid chapter, you can find them on these platforms. That's the good, right? And so maybe I was here to talk optimistically, which is not my vibe usually, y'all.
So Liz, what can we do to also help protect people who are more vulnerable? And, you know, and as we go forward with a pandemic that, you know, some people feel like is over and other people, you know, recognize is not over, you know, as Dr. Zed was saying, it's kind of ebb and flow. We'll probably get new, you know, mutants, and we'll probably deal with other pandemics in the future. Almost certainly we will be dealing with other pandemics in the future. So who is more vulnerable or most vulnerable, and what should we be doing that we're not doing?
Mm-hmm. So Ethan, thanks so much. First of all, mutual aid is super important. There are a lot of ways that you can get involved in mutual aid. One of those ways is that you can seek out people in your community that most need help during this pandemic. So I want to say that first. I'm an immunocompromised person, which means that it has felt like the apocalypse for several months as mask mandates have been lifted. It means that it's more dangerous for me to go outside. So I want to say that one small step again that you can do as a human is that if someone around you is wearing a mask, they're probably wearing that mask for a reason, because they have kids at home that cannot be vaccinated yet, because they themselves are immunocompromised, because they are a caretaker for someone. So that's at a small step, that's something you can do, is just put on the mask. If you don't want to wear a mask otherwise, but someone around you is wearing a mask, just put it on. Like, I think that's one of the small kindnesses that I've seen in strangers that has really given me hope in the past couple of months. I also think that on like a macro level, get involved, know what's up. Know, you know, where the fight for disability rights is. Try to maybe change the labor policy where you work by saying, you know, be aware of these issues, push for changes and policy changes for people that may be most at risk. So I think those are my recommendations, and maybe they're very personal to me, but I think that they're also on a macro level what I wish I'd see more.
I just want a quick note. You know, I think this micro level, getting to know you, Liz, over this past couple of years, you've raised my awareness about immunocompromised people is something I never really knew about. And now I know, and now I take you and everyone else into account when I think about that. When I was making that comment about movie theaters, I mean, that must just be off the table for you, right?
Yeah, I haven't been to a movie theater since December 2019. And I would love to go back. So movie theaters, if they're like, look, could you have like one mask night? Like that would be great. Like I would love to go see a movie. And I think, you know, that the news about when masks were lifted on planes, the news that people mid-flight were taking their masks off really hit me hard, because I thought to myself, gosh, I know that there are people on that plane that feel like just so emotionally devastated by the betrayal of their fellow passengers, because that's what I would feel like. And I'm really glad to hear, Alana, and everyone, that maybe me talking about this is changed things. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Liz, and, you know, sharing with all of us like your situation, because I know, you know, it's a lot to deal with. So really appreciate you sharing your perspective and bringing it.
This is the space. Thanks for being here in the apocalypse, everyone watching and everyone on the team.
I love the focus on community-oriented action and mutual aid too. Because if you think of the butterfly effect where, oh, one thing that happens in the past can have a ripple effect into the future. One thing that you do today, your one voice or action can have that same ripple effect. But we don't see that in the moment when we're doing things out in the world. Like it's something that's less tangible to us. But
yeah, it's like when somebody lets you in traffic and you're like, oh, I know. Thank you, humanity. Yeah. Like,
or puts a mask on when you need one too. Like just those small kindnesses or those small actions to make someone's day better.
And it's really hard in the apocalypse to think about being kind we're so angry and scared and frustrated, right? But I think that's so important. Thank you, Erica.
I had somebody hold the door open for me today while I was bringing it into the studio, and it was just so nice. Like those little things, they really do, they matter. So
was it a zombie that was hoping to get a little nibble of you as you were?
You know, maybe, but look, I'll take what I can get. So.
All right. Well, speaking of zombies, we have the other host of Zombie History here with us, ready to join us, Mzilikazi Kone. Mzilikazi, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Good to see you all.
How are you feeling about these apocalyptic times that we're in? Are you on the optimism side, on the pessimism side?
Well, I'll be honest. In general, I often live on the pessimistic side. You know, I'm hearing a lot of things I identify with. You know, the overthinking or the overreading or the doom scrolling and so forth can certainly put me in a pessimistic mindset, and particularly when I think about these multiple intersecting crises going on now. What we've talked about, right? Whether it be climate change, I'll add to that the crisis of racism, as evidenced by continued racial violence. We might also think about that the way in which that extends into often an anti-immigration stance, not only within this country, but within countries all over the world, which gives me a lot of concern, particularly as I think of things like climate change and recognizing how many people will become climate refugees, escaping their homelands or whatever the place they have made home for more tenable climates. So what's coming down the line is, well, what seems to be coming down the line is a more and even more heightened experience of what we are existing in the now. Uh, However, you know, as a political scientist and also with the inspiration from my colleagues here talking about all the ways of optimism, I'm always brought into optimism because I think about the histories of just within this country, whether it be the histories of genocides against Native American populations and tribes, whether I think about the transatlantic slave trade throughout the Americas and the many who were killed and sacrificed to that. I think about the people who have survived throughout these horrible moments, who have survived, and not only have they survived, but have nurtured and maintained the seed of hope for the future. And I think we owe it to, well, I believe I owe it to the past, the people who've come before me, to maintain optimism, not only for us now, but for the people who are coming after us. I can't help but to think about this conversation of snakes. I'm thinking about the climate change snakes that we have been discussed. Now, Alana took us to a really positive, interesting metaphor with that. I'd like to continue that metaphor of the snakes and think about these capitalists, these billionaires that have become even bigger during COVID, just like the snakes will become bigger throughout this climate change. And when I think about that, these, I will call them billionaire snakes, right? When I think about the transfer of wealth between the working class and the billionaires, I think again, as sad as that is, that we have really nothing left but to push back. We are left in the position where we need to push back against that and thus organize, right? We've got nothing to lose. And to Alana's point about films, if you like a good movie, everybody likes a good movie where the underdog comes back. Well, we are the underdog. Everybody, we're the underdogs right now. And if you like a good underdog movie, then we need to rally. Whether it's Rocky running up those stairs, we have to rally as we're the underdog in this moment to resist. So I'm a little bit in between, as you can see. Not fully pessimist, because where does that get us? I crawl into a hole, right? We've got to nurture the optimism.
It sounds like you're saying we are in this multitude of zombie apocalypses, and the hope lies in resisting the bad forms of zombification, maybe also resisting together and cooperating in order to come up with new solutions to this sort of ever evolving set of apocalypses that we're dealing with.
That's right. And the ways in which we become more isolated from one another, right? We have to recall the role of community, right? And encouraging us and feeding us so that we're not like isolated little beings on this planet, that we exist in community. And community often is the place where we can derive the most strength from, where we can build a sense of solidarity and support, as evidenced through the examples that Liz provided with mutual aid organizations, right? Mutual aid and community organizing is not just about the community, right? It's about the development of the community, the development of those connections, and the support that comes out of that. So yes, that my kernel of hope grows, and the more that we are reminded of community organizing and working, and not just working, but loving one another. Our future depends on it.
Yeah, not just working together, but also having fun together and exploring things together and taking things on as a community.
Right.
Yeah, because there are forces that don't want that, right? Like this is what we know of even labor organizing. They don't want you to organize. They don't want you to get together and have fun. They don't want you to talk at work. They don't want you to share things like how much you make, right? Like, but do it anyway, like create community, because that resistance, thank you so much, Ms. Zilkazi, Ray. I think that's what I've learned from working with you on zombie history, is that resistance is the answer, and resistance comes in so many forms.
Liz, I like the implication that like, because others don't want us to do it, we should do it. Like, no, I know that's not what you mean, but it was kind of funny. But right, it's not that we should do it because they don't want us to, but the fact that like others maybe have something to gain from us not doing it at our expense, right? Like that, to me, that's like where the zombification like goes from potentially being okay to not being okay, right? It's okay if someone wants you to do something, but if it's at your expense and their gain, then that's where we should start to push back, right?
That's right.
So important.
There's that sense though that like it's better for you to stay isolated and depressed and hopeless about the situation, that we are on a doom mission here.
Yeah.
But the mutual aid, the community organizing, the nurturing of hope, right? All of that, there are these intersecting things that we can do that build our hope, that actually give us a fighting chance, right?
Yeah.
And to engage in politics. Come back to Erica, reminding us of the need to build locally, right? What's the adage? Think globally, act locally. Because these are global problems, but we need to do what we can in our own backyards, as it were, to be a part of the movement.
Real quick, I want to address that comment that Pam just made about Darwinism breeding a strange kind of selfishness, because like this is like an idea that I think a lot of people think is that like Darwinism and evolution means that selfishness will prevail, but that's absolutely not true. If you look at like how things actually evolve, cooperation is central. I mean, even to the very existence of multicellular life. Like we are 30 trillion cells that cooperate and coordinate their behavior to make us functional. And then, as humans, we have just unbelievable levels of cooperation, and many other species as well. So I just want to put a little pin in this one. Maybe we'll come back to it next season, but definitely evolution does not say that selfishness will prevail. It's basically mutual aid and helping and coordinating and cooperating, hugely important for the evolution of life.
Think we could get together sometime in the fall and maybe like cooperate around some of these ideas?
That's a great idea. In fact, we have a meeting coming up in October. October 20th through 23rd will be the next ZAM meeting. So yeah, please take a look at our website, zombiemed.org. Wait, not yet. We have to update it with the abstracts. That will happen this week. And you'll be able to go on and submit an abstract. Is that right, Dave? So
if you want to submit an abstract, just take me through the step-by-step. If
okay,
I'm like, I want to submit an abstract. What do I do?
You want to submit an abstract. So within the next week, we will be putting out a call for abstracts, and there will be a link that you can follow and then send in your abstract. And then we will be having a meeting. It's going to be partially live streamed and partially in person. What's going on? Are you guys You guys okay over there?
I hear. Oh my gosh!
Oh,
I think people are bringing they're bringing
Oh.
bananas. The bananas are taking
Oh
over.
my goodness.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Miranda, the zombies are great.
I think there's
We're
a
ready to
zombie
find a
problem
new studio.
happening in the
So,
studio.
hopefully
They've
by
broken
October,
in?
We'll have a new place to play.
Okay, all right. Well, be sure to subscribe, everybody, to Zombie Media. Make sure you like this live stream. And thank you to everybody for joining us for this edition of Undead Live. Remember, we've got the apocalypse covered.
It's crazy, but it seems so logical. I can't deny that there is something supernatural with you.